Hi and welcome to my vlog. This is vlog 004, my 5th vlog because I start with zeros, just like an A programmer would in counting. Today is December 30th. With any luck, I'll release this video on December 30th, 31st at the latest, and I wanted to just kind of go over... I'm going to move the mic a little bit closer. I wanted to just go over my year. This is kind of my year-end review video, and I'm going to be looking over here because I wrote a whole article, I'll put a link below, that talks about all the things that I learned and a lot of things in depth, and I just kind of wanted to go over some of the things here on my vlog, just for the sake of completeness, I guess. But yeah, so this year I worked at a company, a tech startup, an oil and gas tech startup. I worked there last year as well, so nothing changed there. But I encountered a few interesting problems and a few interesting challenges, technology-wise, that kind of really impacted and shaped the work I've been doing and the things that I've been interested in. One of the things that I've had to tackle this year has been my year of indecision. And my year of indecision is basically just me the whole year trying to figure out where do I want to go next after working with Angular 1 for 3 years, a little over 3 years now. So I've been working with Angular 1 for 3 years. I've worked a little bit with React, a little bit with some of the other frameworks, Knockout before Angular 1. But one of the things that I've gotten to this year is that, well, Angular 1 is going to reach end of life soon. You know, maybe the next few years, but I can't be left behind. And there are some technological problems that we kind of face at work and other places that is slowly showing that Angular 1, or rather Angular 1 is showing its age. And the community is moving somewhere else, so support isn't there as much, knowledgeable developers aren't there as much, excitement about this technology isn't there as much. But I've been trying to decide between React, Vue, what else, Angular 2, Elm, like all these different frameworks, these languages, these different solutions, and I wasn't able to make up my mind. Everything sounds great, everything is exciting, everything is awesome, and one of the things that I come upon is like this dichotomy, I hope that's the right word, between these two different worlds. This like very simple, you know, library-oriented, JavaScript-oriented way of doing things, like with React, or Vue, I guess to a certain capacity, or this enterprisey Angular 2 TypeScript kind of feel. And it's really difficult to figure out which one fits more to your way of writing code and of creating architectures. Because the more you scale out, and scale is another thing that I've been dealing with, the more you scale out, the more you need more than just like this loose set of libraries. The more you need a structure, an architecture, a way of tackling problems, and having the right places to put your code so that everything still makes sense. And I've been kind of hitting my head against brick walls with Angular 1, not because it's bad, but because the architecture changed, the recommended architecture changed over time. And in the same manner, you know, so do you want something that's really well architected or something that's very simple? In the end, I decided that I'm just going to go with React. One of the big reasons why I want to go with React is because that's where the community lives, and React Fiber, I guess the React 2.0, so to speak, is getting out there with new APIs, with significant speed improvements, but they're keeping the old API surface as well. It means that transitioning traditional React to React Fiber is not that big of a deal, but it gains you a lot of improvements. That wasn't the same with Angular at all, and with the fact that React Fiber is going to be coming out, it makes me think that that might be the long-term solution. Vue.js I feel like is still young. I tried Vue.js back when it was like a alpha version, and it was really great to actually work with it, and I still have a project on GitHub. But now that it's kind of gaining speed and popularity, I might look into that. I might want to look into that as well, but still, React is kind of the core of the JavaScript community is moving in that way, and I'm pretty happy with that. So that's been something that I've been dealing with kind of this year, just trying to figure out where I want to go, trying to scale out our code and figure out what needs to happen next to make everything work well. And the problem with scale oftentimes is just that you don't know what you don't know, especially when you're starting out. And that's been that's been very true over the past couple of years. Ever since I started writing this tech application that I've been hired to write. You just don't know what you don't know, and 2 years later, there's still a significant amount of code left from the original code base, but there's also still a significant amount of code that needs to be updated or is obsolete. So it's just a few things like that. It's kind of interesting. The next thing that I've been kind of reflecting on has been the not invented versus invented syndrome. So the idea is that not invented here means that you kind of offload your code base and your code requirements onto a third-party library, for example. So, instead of trying to roll your own bundler in JavaScript, you use Webpack. And that makes sense. But sometimes it goes to an extreme where you try to find third-party libraries and solutions that don't fit 100% of your requirements, and maybe not even 80% of your requirements. And what becomes problematic is that you write that third-party library into your code base, and then you need that last 10 to 20% done, but there's no way around it, no way to do it, because the library doesn't support it, and maybe there's not even a hacky workaround you can implement there. So I've been kind of just dealing with that versus the invented here syndrome, where you don't want to rely on any third-party libraries, which I think is ridiculous as well. I think a good example of invented here versus not invented here is using Lodash. I think Lodash is the perfect reason to not rewrite your own, not roll your own solutions. It's well tested. It's well tested for speed, and that's one of the things I would not want to invent here, right? But for example, there's a library called C3, which rests on top of D3 that makes graphs a lot easier to create, or visualizations a lot easier to create. The problem is that it's kind of like a we've got a lot of the solutions, a lot of the things done situations, but it will take you 80% there, and you have to do the last 20%. So it almost makes me think that maybe you want to invent a C3 like library for your own purposes. So that's been something that I've just been looking into, just trying to weigh out what third library is worth using, what's not. And with the NPM ecosystem, where you have millions of packages and you don't even know how well they're supported, tested, or if they're going to be supported in the future, it's kind of a gamble trying to either invent it here or not invent it here. That's been another thing that I've been dealing with. After that, I tried a few more technologies, and I don't necessarily want to go through all of them, but I tried Webpack, I tried Electron, I did a good amount of stuff with Angular 2 this year, and it's all really fun stuff. Like, I'm pretty happy that that's how I spent a good amount of my time. I started working on a markdown editor called Omen. You can see videos about it from before in my video series, Startup, Productivity, and Personal Life. That was one of the subjects that I was focusing on. The other subject that I was focusing on there was writing a book. And so that's my other thing. So let me just jump from technology. I think I'm done with technology. There's a few other things you can read in my article about it if you want to. It's not a lot of important or interesting stuff, really. Just about selectiveness, which I vlogged about last week or last 2 weeks ago or whatever. And then management, and I wrote a whole article on that too, and I just don't want to get into like a 50-minute discussion on management, personal management at a company, and so on. It's just been kind of a trip. I mean, technology-wise, it's been a crazy year for the community. For me, it's been more of having to deal with real-world problems rather than, which library I jump into next. I mean, I was just talking about, having to decide between those libraries, but that's a little bit different than which library do you want to jump into next, because I think it's the next hot thing. I haven't been kind of following any of those trends. I have been following them, I just haven't been investing my time into them as much, which is a good thing, I guess. I feel more like an engineer this year. But otherwise, I did a lot of stuff writing-wise. I think it was in February, I streamed for the entire month, an hour a day, book editing, and that's been a lot of fun. I think I'm like halfway through, and I hope I can finish it next year. The other thing that I was doing this year was writing a NaNoWriMo. So my November NaNoWriMo is a young adult novel a fantasy young adult novel, and it's actually the first fantasy novel I've written and first young adult novel, like really targeted at young adults novel that I've written, and I'm really happy with it because I spent months preparing for it, and this is the first time I really prepared for writing NaNoWriMo. I usually just come up with an idea and start writing, and that comes naturally to me. It didn't necessarily happen with this book because I had an outline, but I think it's better. It's better. I think it's a much better book than, let's say, the one I wrote last year or the year before that. It's no longer stream of consciousness type of stuff. It's more of, let me go ahead and write a solid book. It's a solid plot, solid outline, solid characters. I'm very happy with the outcome. It needs a ton of editing, but it's a wonderful base. Which brings me to my, I guess, next thing, and that's what I want to do next year. So last year I got a lot of the tech stuff going on, a lot of writing going on. I even did a lot of gaming. Diablo 2, oh my god, finally finished it. And I'm still trying to finish Pokemon Sun and Moon, or like I only have Pokemon Sun. But what do I want to do next year? What do I want to focus on? So one of the main things I want to focus on is writing more apps. When I wrote that Markdown editor, it really showed me some of the issues with, let's say, Angular 2, some of the barriers where I felt uncomfortable writing Angular 2 applications, and that kind of drove my decision toward going with React than anything else, because I also wrote an app in React called HRPG, which is a Habitica client, desktop client, and with React it was super simple. React and Redux, just perfect. It worked really fucking well. With Angular 2, things worked well as well, but there were a few things that I wasn't entirely comfortable with. A few ways that the data didn't update that I expected it to. Maybe because I still assumed that it should work like either Angular 1 or React, basically, but it works like neither of those. It works like a weird combination of both. Yeah, but anyway, so for next year, I want to write more apps. I definitely want to write more apps. I want to write more small apps, and it doesn't matter what language. I just want to get more code in there, mainly because the only code I write these days is for work, and I want to branch out of that. The other thing I want to focus on is more support for the things and more updates for the libraries that I've written. I wrote several testing libraries, several libraries that I use at work, and I would really like to support those better, make the updates that I want to make updates to. I wrote a WordPress theme that I still use, that I wrote, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago? 4 years ago? I wrote a WordPress theme 4 years ago and I still use it for my projects, and I'd like to give it an overhaul and an update. I mean, like, it uses Gulp and it, like, you know, does all these cool things, but it's way behind. So at least I like to update the dependencies, write the code nicer and whatever. It's something that I'm actually excited about, visiting the past, so to speak, and updating that. And the other thing that I want to focus on is also learning more languages. So last year, or this year, I tried to look more into frameworks for JavaScript, front-end frameworks. The next thing I would like to do is look more into languages. And I've been spending the past couple of weeks looking at Elixir, and I've been having a lot of fun with it because it's so different. I've been stuck in JavaScript land for 3 years now. Before that, I was stuck in PHP land for, I don't know, another 3 years, I think. 3, maybe 4 years. 4 years, yeah. So that's a lot of PHP, that's a lot of JavaScript, and that's a lot of nothing else. I did some C#, I did a little bit of Ruby, not enough to really say that, hey, I'm a Ruby programmer, or hey, I can do C#. I can't. But I did spend some time with those two languages, and I'd like to make either Elixir or one of the other languages I've picked my next big focus. The other focus that I'm looking at is also Go language. I tried to work with it last year, not this year, but actually last year. I tried to work with it a little bit this year. I didn't get really far, mainly because I felt like there were too many rifts in the community as to how you should write your web applications, that I felt like, well, I don't want to invest my time into something that I'm going to have to throw away. And the last language I want to focus on is Rust, just because there's so much hype around it, and I just want to see what it's about. I think they say it's the best language that you'll try to find projects for. Basically, that you'll never use outside of theoretical applications. The last thing, I think, well, I have a few more points, but my vlog is running a little bit long today. So let me just go over these points really quickly. I also want to be more selective. I talked about cues in my last vlog and earlier. I also want to do more YouTube videos. I'm really enjoying making these videos. I want to do more tutorials. I enjoyed making that webpack tutorial you'll see from last week. And I want to do less social media. I've been wasting a shit ton of time on Twitter, talking to other developers, and while it's great to get all that perspective, I'd like to maybe hunker down and learn and read books and stuff like that for a little bit longer. Just pull out of that community, not be as involved in tweeting about every other thing. It was great this year. I really enjoyed it, but I think it's time to get away from that for a little bit. Now, I have a few personal goals, and I'll mention those. But I'd like to mention that I don't plan on spending more time on development in my free time. I don't want to expand where it's gotten. I think whatever amount of time I spend right now on programming in my free time should not be more than what it is already. I have a daughter, I have a son on the way. I can't afford to lose any more time. I can't afford to lose any time with them, really, to programming. Right now, the only time I'm losing is at night when my daughter is asleep and my son's going to be asleep once he's born. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I like to stay up a little bit longer. And I'm okay with spending 15-20 minutes a day on Elixir or writing a markdown editor or writing a book. So as far as my personal goals, I want to write another NaNoWriMo book. I want to finish editing my NaNoWriMo book. I actually have to check these out. I've been spending the last couple months learning Russian. Привет. And I'd like to expand that. I've been having a lot of fun with that because my wife speaks Russian and I'd like to teach my daughter to speak Russian. I'd like to also read more books. I found out that I read 2 books last year. That's my lowest average since I was like 12. I've been usually reading 4, 5, 10 books a year. Last year was 2 books. I feel very embarrassed by that. And lastly, I want to become a better parent. And I think I've been doing a pretty good job, but over the past month, I've tried to be more calmer, more patient, and I found my daughter really responding to that. And I've also been more energetic. So after work, before I had kids, I was very much like, oh man, I'm like done with today. Let me put on some dinner and put on TV and hang out and just like be done with the day. Now I'm trying to be a little bit more like, I'm off work, let me go run around the house with my daughter while she's screaming and yelling and having fun. I love that. I think that it enriches my life. It makes me happier. It makes me happier with how I spend my time. It just makes me happy. I'm gonna cry. Okay. Pulling back from that. Yeah, this is the last vlog of the year, last YouTube video. Hopefully I'll upload it today. And thank you for watching. And I hope that you had a great year. Outside of politics and outside of all the horrible shit that happened, I hope you had a personally good year in your personal life, stuff that personally affected you. I hope that was good, and we can, yeah. And if you want to leave a comment below, I'd be very happy to hear about your year and what your goals are for next year. And I'll leave my article link below as well if you want to read more into detail about my life, about this year for me. Thanks, and I'll see you later.